They always said the Royal Guards were just a tourist attraction. That was until a woman collapsed, screaming about invisible shadows stalking her. Then one of those guards broke formation and locked eyes with me. What he whispered froze my blood. But let's start from the beginning. I'm not going to lie, London has a vibe. You know, the kind of eerie charm that makes you feel like you're in a movie where something's about to go really wrong. That's what hit me the moment I stood on this historic street, camera in hand, surrounded by clueless tourists snapping selfies. The crisp Union Jack flags swayed lazily above us, and every so often you'd catch fragments of conversations, excited kids, couples arguing over whose fault it was they missed the last bus, and of course, the street performers trying to hustle a few coins. It was chaotic, but normal. For now, my name's Damon Carter. I'm 29, a war vet, and yeah, I've seen some crazy stuff in my time, but I didn't come to London for any of that. Nope. Today's mission was simple. Film the famous changing of the guard ceremony and send the footage to the news portal I freelance for. Easy money, right? Or so I thought. The guards started their march, and man, talk about discipline. These dudes move like machines, rigid, faces blank as marble statues. The tourists loved it, of course. Phones went up in unison like we were at a concert. I positioned myself to get the perfect shot, focusing on the synchronized clatter of their boots on the pavement. Everything was running smoothly. Until she showed up. Now, let me tell you, she was hard to miss. A blonde woman, early 30s, wearing what looked like an expensive dress that had seen way too much action. It was stained, rumpled, and gave off serious, bad decisions were made energy. You know the type. She stumbled through the crowd like a malfunctioning GPS, yelling loud enough for half of London to hear. Why do they even stand like that? It's creepy as hell, she slurred, waving her arms dramatically. I narrowed my eyes and instinctively hit record. This was going to be gold. The crowd parted around her like she had the plague. People exchanged amused glances, probably thinking she was just another drunk tourist. But there was something off about her, something that made my skin crawl. Her eyes darted around like she was seeing shadows no one else could. She staggered closer to the guards, and that's when it hit me. Oh no, she's not really gonna, I muttered under my breath. Spoiler, she absolutely did. Before anyone could stop her, she lunged forward and kicked one of the guards in the shin. Hard. You could hear the impact, a sharp thud that made the crowd gasp in unison. But here's the wild part. The guard didn't flinch, not even a blink. It was like she'd just kicked a granite statue. The crowd went dead silent, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. The woman's smug grin vanished in an instant. Her face went pale, eyes widening in sheer terror. She stumbled backward, shaking like she'd seen a ghost. No, scratch that, like she was surrounded by them. Get them away from me! They're watching me! She screamed, her voice cracking as she crumpled to the ground. Okay, now everyone was freaking out. Some people backed away like she was contagious. Others laughed nervously, still thinking it was all part of some drunken meltdown. But me? I kept the camera rolling. This wasn't just some random outburst. Her fear was too real, too raw. I could feel it like a cold breeze crawling down my spine. An older British man standing next to me leaned in, his voice low and conspiratorial. Bloody history follows them. These guards don't flinch. But there's a reason they're feared, he murmured, his eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite place. What the heck did that mean? The air around us grew heavy, almost suffocating. The guards continued their march as if nothing had happened, their footsteps echoing ominously in the sudden hush. The blonde woman was still on the ground, sobbing and clutching at invisible threats. I swallowed hard, trying to shake off the sense of dread creeping up my spine. Whatever this was, it wasn't normal, and I had a feeling I had just stumbled into something way bigger than a simple tourist attraction. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was being watched, and not in a good way. The crowd scattered like dominoes after the guards resumed their march. The blonde woman was dragged away by security, kicking and screaming nonsense about eyes watching her. People whispered in confusion, some recording the aftermath on their phones. Me? I couldn't let it go. Something wasn't adding up, and my gut was screaming louder than any conspiracy theory subreddit. I should have left it alone, gone back to my apartment, and binge-watched something to clear my head. But you know how curiosity works. It's like that annoying friend who drags you into trouble and leaves you holding the bag. I followed the trail of whispers and questions, straight to the nearest pub, because, hey, when in London, right? The place was a classic. Dim lighting, wooden beams, and enough questionable decor to feel haunted by bad interior design choices. I was halfway to ordering a drink when I noticed him, a man in a long black coat standing by the corner booth, watching me like I was tonight's entertainment. He didn't look like your average drunk patron. Too sharp, too calm. He caught my eye and strolled over with the kind of confidence that usually screams, "I know things you don't." "You were filming, weren't you?" he said casually, his voice smooth but unsettling. "And you're American, I assume? New in town?" Okay, this was getting creepy fast. I gave him a cautious nod. "Yeah, I was filming. Is that a problem?" He chuckled softly. "Let me give you a piece of advice. Don't dig too deep into the guards. Their history is darker than most people realize. Now, any sane person would have taken that as their cue to nope out of there, but not me. No, I've never been one to back off from a challenge, especially not when someone dangles a mystery in front of me." I leaned in slightly, matching his intensity. "What exactly are you saying? Ghost stories? Urban legends? Come on, man. You can't drop a line like that and expect me to walk away." The man, Detective Brian Harris, as he later introduced himself, just shook his head, smirking like he knew I'd regret this conversation. "I'm saying some truths are better left buried, but if you insist, start with the records at St. George's Archives. Just don't say I didn't warn you." With that cryptic advice, he slipped out of the pub, leaving me with more questions than answers. I sat there for a minute, wondering if I'd just been recruited for the latest episode of Unsolved Mysteries. But something in his tone stuck with me. This wasn't a prank. There was real fear in his voice, buried under the cool demeanor. The next day, I followed his lead and dove headfirst into the archives. Let me tell you, research isn't nearly as exciting as it looks in movies. No dramatic music, no eureka moments in dusty books, just hours of flipping through records, scanning old articles, and piecing together a puzzle no one else seemed to care about. But then I found it. A grainy video from 10 years ago, buried in the depths of a local news site. It showed another tourist, a guy who looked like he had zero business messing with royal traditions, acting erratic in front of the guards. He freaked out, much like the blonde woman had, screaming about being hunted by something invisible. The footage cut out abruptly, and according to the accompanying report, the guy was never seen again. No witnesses, no follow-ups, just gone. I leaned back, rubbing my eyes. This couldn't be a coincidence. The guards were the common thread, and their unflinching presence was starting to feel less like discipline and more like something unnatural. The more I dug, the weirder things got. There were scattered mentions of executions on that very street centuries ago. Legends of restless spirits tied to the royal guard. People whispered about those who crossed the line during the ceremony vanishing without a trace. Superstitions? Maybe. But it was enough to set every nerve in my body on edge. That night, sleep was not an option. When I finally crashed around 2 a.m., the nightmares hit hard and fast. I was back on that street, surrounded by the guards. Only this time, they weren't statues. Their faces twisted and distorted like something out of a horror flick. Their eyes, cold, unblinking, bored into me as if they could see every secret I'd ever tried to hide. I tried to move, to run, but my legs refused to cooperate. I was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear. The guards formed a perfect circle around me, their footsteps echoing like a countdown to something terrible. One of them stepped forward, his voice low and chilling. "You shouldn't have looked." I woke up in a cold sweat, heart pounding like I'd just sprinted a marathon. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. And something told me I'd just scratched the surface. I found myself standing right back where it all started, at that cursed street in front of the palace. You ever have that feeling like the universe is daring you to make a bad decision? Yeah, that was me right then and there. In my hands were the printouts of every bizarre article, every freaky disappearance tied to this place. The camera was slung over my shoulder, ready to capture whatever weirdness was about to go down. The air felt heavier than last time, like I was walking through some invisible fog no one else could feel. Crowds of tourists buzzed around me, clueless and cheerful, snapping selfies and giggling at the guards like this was just another tourist trap. But I wasn't here for cheap entertainment. I wanted answers. The guards began their march. That same mechanical precision as before. Their faces were as emotionless as ever, but now I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Their eyes. Holy, their eyes. They weren't lifeless like before. They were alert, aware. And worse, they were watching me, not the crowd, me. I gripped the camera tighter, swallowing the lump in my throat. Okay, Damon, chill. You're just imagining things. They're not actually watching you, right? But then it happened. A sharp, panicked scream tore through the air, cutting through the crowd like a knife. Everyone froze, heads whipping around to see where it came from. I turned just in time to see one of the guards break formation. He didn't hesitate. His movements were slow but deliberate, like he had all the time in the world and knew exactly what he was doing. The crowd erupted into chaos. People stumbled over each other, trying to get out of his path, their excited chatter replaced by frantic gasps. "Is this part of the ceremony?" someone asked, their voice trembling. Spoiler, it absolutely wasn't. The guard marched straight toward me, his boots striking the pavement with an ominous rhythm. My legs locked up. I wanted to move, to run, but it was like my body had forgotten how to function. All I could do was stand there like a deer caught in headlights. He stopped just inches from me. For a moment, neither of us moved. The crowd around us faded into white noise. It was just me and him, and the intensity in his gaze was enough to freeze my blood solid. He leaned in, his voice barely a whisper, but somehow crystal clear in the chaos around us. "Leave, while you still can." I felt like the ground had dropped out from under me. His voice wasn't just a warning. It was a command. Something primal deep inside me screamed that I had to listen. Now. I didn't need to be told twice. I bolted, the camera swinging wildly at my side as I pushed through the crowd. My heart was pounding like a drum, every instinct screaming at me to get as far away from that place as possible. Behind me, I heard more screams and the sound of heavy boots hitting the pavement, but I didn't dare look back. I didn't stop running until I reached an alleyway several blocks away. I doubled over, gasping for air, sweat pouring down my face. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the camera. I sat on the curb, trying to steady my breathing. "What the hell was that?" I muttered to myself, my voice barely above a whisper. After a few minutes, I gathered enough courage to check the footage. My fingers trembled as I rewound the recording. The camera had caught everything. Every second of the guard breaking formation, the panic in the crowd, and the moment he spoke to me, but that wasn't what made my stomach drop. In the background of the footage, I saw them, shadows, dozens of them, tall, distorted figures standing behind the guards, their outlines flickering like static on an old TV screen. They weren't there when I was filming. I swear on everything I didn't see them in real time, but there they were, watching, waiting. I froze, my mind racing. This isn't real. This can't be real. But no matter how many times I replayed the footage, the shadows remained. Their presence was undeniable. Whatever this was, it wasn't just in my head. I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. And whatever those shadows were, they had noticed me. What would you have done in Damon's situation? Would you have stayed to get more answers or run the second that guard whispered to you? Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you or anyone you know ever experienced something that gave you chills like this? Let's hear those stories. And if you enjoyed the suspense, don't forget to like and share to support more stories like this. Remember, this story was created to shed light on deeper issues and inspire change. Sometimes what appears mysterious or terrifying on the surface has real-world roots in history, trauma, and injustice. We aim to spark conversation and awareness to make the world a better place.